All right. I will kick us off. I'm Meredith Dodson, the Executive Director of SF Parents. Thank you for joining us today. Our agenda is really focused on the budget, on the district's budget. As many of you have been seeing and hearing, there's a lot of mixed news about the budget, and we are going to be hearing directly from the Deputy Superintendent of Business Services and Operations. We call him the CBO for short, but that's Chris Mount-Benites. He's joining us today, and we'll hear a lot from him. And we'll be able to get a lot of your questions and concerns answered in just a few minutes. We have a lot of questions that have come in, so please be patient if your question doesn't get answered today, because we've had dozens and dozens of questions come in. I don't know the total number, but it's a lot. And so we're going to get as many answered as possible, and then hopefully we can share the rest of those. I know we will share the rest of those questions with the district, and hopefully they will continue to answer them. So we'll give brief updates. We'll hear from Chris, and we'll also share a bit from our managing director, Nicole Gangitano. We'll share a little bit about how you can get engaged in the budget process at your school. If you've never done this before, if you're a kindergarten parent or a TK parent, and you have no idea how to weigh in, it's really important that you do weigh in. And so we'll share a little bit more about what that looks like from the parent perspective. Okay. So if you're new to us, we are SF Parents. We're a strong community of SFUSD families, teachers, community members from across the district. We started in 2020. Over the last 5 years, we've been advocating for excellence and equity across our schools. We believe SFUSD can and should be the best district across the nation of any major city. So we have a little ways to go, but we're already making progress, and we're going to get there with your help. We are achieving real wins. Sorry, I had a pop-up on my screen. Achieving real wins for kids, from math and literacy to the budget. Well, budget we'll talk about today. We're seeing some progress, but also some concerns and some room for improvement. And our mission is to center the needs of children and youth in San Francisco public schools by bringing together our diverse network of families and supporters to advocate for a thriving, equitable school system. Okay. Quick norms: we stay curious about different perspectives. We center the voices, assets, needs, and aspirations of our students and families. We listen and we lift up what we hear. We allow others to process on their own before sharing our opinions. Zoom logistics. We know everyone has a tendency to go off camera. It's also the lunch hour. We understand you're maybe at work, you're eating, and it's one of our, especially when slides come down, it's really nice to see each other. So if you're able to, feel free to come on camera. It helps us build community and to see each other. And it's just a nice thing. So if you're able to, great. And if you're not, that's okay too. Raise your hand if you want to share. I'm not exactly sure when that will be. We're all muted for now due to the size of the group today. And Nicole will be managing the Q&A later. And so she will have guidelines for how to do that. But again, we did collect a lot of questions in advance. So I think we're mostly going through those, and she will explain how that's going to work later. Quickly, our current campaigns. We've got our budget campaign. This has been around, focusing on making sure the district maintains local control, does not get taken over by the state, because when the state takes over, that means bureaucrats in Sacramento have control over decision-making with what's happening in our budget locally. We don't think they care as much about San Francisco's kids as San Franciscans care about San Francisco's kids. And so generally, it's better for districts to maintain local control if they can. We want to see the district tie its dollars better to what matters for student outcomes. And we also want to see the district ensure greater transparency and accountability around the information that they're sharing. So we know what's going on. When parents are informed, when teachers are informed, we can be better advocates for what's happening and what our kids need in the schools, in the classrooms. We have our Kids Can't Wait campaign, which is focused on literacy and math. We've been advocating both around the new math program and the new literacy program to make sure teachers are supported, getting compensated professional development time, support with the new curriculum and materials, getting that coaching, those instructional coaches that we have in each school. And so this campaign continues, and we're not through the woods with adoption. And so we're tracking this closely. Jerry on our team, who you see here on the screen, has been managing that campaign. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, you can reach out to her, Jerry at sfparents.org. And we're always looking for more parents to get involved. And then accountability is kind of what we're doing today around, ties both back to the budget and just ensuring that district leadership is accountable to our kids. So before we introduce and hand it over to the Deputy Superintendent of Budget and Operations, we just wanted to share what we know. We shared this in our newsletter last week. We know that the district has an improved fiscal rating from the state, and this is good news. So the district had a negative rating with the state. You'll probably hear more from Chris about this. But we had a negative rating for the state, which is the closest step to full takeover. So we were under what we call partial takeover, colloquially, where the district had some control over our spending decisions. But we just were able to move into qualified, which means the state's backing off a bit. We still have state advisors, but they're not preventing the district from making spending decisions, which is good. So we're no longer at the immediate risk of state takeover. And we could reach a balanced budget by March. The bad news is we are seeing major cuts. And so we know that's why a lot of you are here today. We are seeing things proposed. These are not approved, but they're proposed, and they'll be discussed at the next Board of Education meeting next Tuesday. For example, middle school shifts from 7 periods to 6 periods, which means fewer teachers, fewer electives. We're seeing proposed cuts in terms of assistant principals, counselors, maybe most concerningly, social workers, except at Title I schools where they would be preserved. This we know is something that a lot of you are showing up about. We saw a lot of you at the Board of Education meeting on Tuesday, and we are similarly concerned about the prospect of losing social workers from our schools. We know the critical importance of how they support our students. We're seeing an almost $9 million cut to across schools proposed, and some other proposed reductions. School closures potentially proposed. I think the district will be talking through that or working through that this coming school year, or sorry, this coming calendar year, in terms of what that might look like. There's no proposal yet, but the Board of Education did direct the superintendent to pursue a plan around it, or consolidations or some kind of portfolio school reorganizations. We don't know anything about that yet, other than that they're considering it. Then the confusing news is, while all this is happening, we just saw the board approve a reserve fund, which is generally best budgeting practices, and I'm sure Chris will corroborate that. Great budgeting practices for any school district. And the timing is really hard to hear that they're putting away $100 million into a reserve fund at the same time that we're cutting $1 million from our schools. And so hopefully we know that's a lot of the questions around that today. How does that timing make sense? And is this the right time to be putting money into a reserve, even if it's district best practice, given that we're in this crisis situation of cutting some critical positions to our schools? So this is what we know, and we're going to hear more details from Chris. Also, before I introduce him, I just want to recognize that we have some special guests in the room. Also, again, given how serious the situation is for the district's budget. Again, mixed news, right? Good news about the state qualification, and also bad news about the continued cuts and this funding crisis. And so we lifted up these concerns to the mayor's office, to our state delegations offices, and others. And so in the room today, we have representatives from the mayor's office, from Senator Scott Wiener's office, and from President Mandelman's office as well. And I think we might have a reporter in the room, and we've asked them to not quote anything from you unless they have your approval. So if someone says something really compelling, we will not let them quote you unless we get your approval. So just so you all know about that. And so with that, I think we are going to introduce Chris. Yes. Okay. So We will now hand things over to Chris from the district, the Deputy Superintendent of Business Operations. We're really happy to have him here today to explain the complicated budget situation, as he can explain it much better than I can. So Chris, thank you so much for being here, and we are ready for you to tell families what's going on with the budget.
Hey there, Meredith. Thank you. Good to see you. Good to see everybody. And so I'm going to, I don't know, Meredith, did you want me to share my screen, or are you going to, or do you folks want to put up the first interim as we just quickly walk through it for those folks that didn't get a chance to see it already?
Nicole,
Chris, I'm going to give you sharing ability.
Okay. So as Meredith was mentioning, the district has been in negative certification for a few years, and the certifications are really important as far as school districts in the state of California are concerned. There's three potential certifications. The one that we want, of course, is a positive certification. And all that means for those folks that are trying to figure out certification levels is that based on the budget that we submit, that we can pay all of our expenses for the current year and the next 2 years. So it's always current plus 2 when we look at our certification status. The next one down from certification is a qualified or conditional certification, which means we may be able to pay all of our expenses for the current and the next 2 years. And the one that we've been operating under is a negative certification, which means that we cannot pay all of our budgeted expenses. It's known that we can't for the current and the next 2 years. So it's always that 3-year view. There is another area, and so that's, people have asked me, well, are we in receivership? No, we are not. Receivership in the state of California under AB 1200 means that we not only can't pay our bills, but we've had to take out a loan in order to pay our bills. And that's when a state appointed receiver is appointed to a district, and they actually take over the authority on anything financial from both the school board and the superintendent until the district is back in good financial shape. So of course, we never want to be there. We have been in negative. However, at the first interim, we submitted our first qualified budget since going negative, which means that we are trying to make one step forward. We're waiting for concurrence of that certification from California Department of Education, and we do anticipate receiving that. The numbers are what they are, and then moving forward, of course, the board's goal is to get back to a positive certification. And so why is that the goal? Is because once we get back to a positive, the ability of the CDE appointed financial advisors, the rescind authority, which is what they have, goes away. So what does that mean? Rescind authority means that they are currently allowed to overturn any decision that the Board of Education makes that they don't find fiscally sustainable, right? So for example, if those of you that watch the board meeting, you'll see that we approved a TA for our principal bargaining unit, but the TA is paid for, their raises are paid for, and it's budget neutral by taking things out of that unit and reducing some expenses in a commensurate amount to pay for their agreement for their raises. And so CDE concurred that we would be able to provide that. Had they not, they could simply at that point say no, regardless of how the board wants to vote, because it is a financial topic, we can overturn it. So that's sort of the level of agreement that we need before we make any significant financial decisions in the school district. And that is the authority or the oversight that Meredith was referencing. However, even when we go positive, and we will go positive, I'm one to make sure goals happen. When we go positive, those CDE advisors, they don't have their rescind authority any longer, but they are still with the district for 24 months after the point that we go positive. And that's because going positive is actually, and I say this as a long time CFO and deputy and soup for districts in California that are under fiscal distress, it's actually easier to get back to positive than to maintain it. So the reason they're here for 24 months after we go positive is to monitor. And if we go back into negative, they come back and their authority is reasserted. So that's sort of the process, and that's high level summary of where the district has been and where they've been struggling financially for the past few years. So with that said, I will give you the update that we did 2 nights ago for the board and the community, the first interim report. So every year a district adopts a budget in June, and then we do a first interim of any significant changes for July through October, and we present that interim in December, which is what we just did. The second interim covers any changes through the end of the month of February, and that interim is presented next March, and then we go back into the adoption cycle. So this is the first of the significant statutorily required reports. And for those of you that are finance wonks, and I've met a bunch of lovely, and I say that as one myself, a bunch of you out there that have a lot of financial knowledge and you want the detailed forms, those are all the forms. So the presentation is just a presentation. What the board's approving are all what we call the SACs, or the standard accounting forms, that are attached to the item. There's hundreds of pages of them, but for those of you that like finance, that's the stuff that you like to look through, and that's attached to the board agenda as well. So with that said, I'm going to quickly go through the presentation. I know it's a lot, and it was a very lengthy presentation the other night, so I'm going to go through it in just a few minutes. As soon as I can make the share screen function work with all my screens. Great. And apologies for resolution. I am on one of my little workstations that I'm using my laptop camera and microphone. So hopefully you can see the presentation at this point, and I'm going to whip through it fairly quickly. This is also posted online, so any of you that want to download it and take a closer look later, you're welcome to. So this was the first interim report. I've gone over this sort of introductory information already. This goes over the certifications that I was just referencing, and shows where we are currently in the annual budget process for this year, and then provides some context of what we've done so far to improve the fiscal standing of the school district, the way that we were able to make improvements in our certification. Which was a lot of budget cleanup and implementing budget controls that are very appropriate for a school district. And then also the discussion of the creation of a reserve in Fund 17. And then the recommended certification, which went from negative to qualified at this point. And then we get into the financial stuff. So I'm going to slow down a little bit. Some of you are followers of this, so I want to make sure that you have the information that you're looking for. So essentially looking at our unrestricted general fund, you can see that there's not been a huge amount of change, except that our deficit, our structural deficit in the unrestricted general fund did go up a little bit, about $2.5 million. Of increase, and then it describes our anticipated ending fund balance even after the transfer and the creation of a district reserve fund in Fund 17, and the components of that fund balance. So ending fund balance is just the amount of money left over from prior years of unspent budget from year to year. And so the fund balance was significant, and there's enough to pay this year for the shortfall. And also there's enough left there to pay for the next 2 years, which is how we got to qualified rather than being negative. The biggest thing to really illustrate with this slide isn't actually the numbers, it's the comparison of the numbers from prior years. So we've really struggled in San Francisco with the idea that we have very few budget controls. And so the revenues and expenses listed on our interim reports can fluctuate wildly. And when I say wildly, they can go up and down each interim report in the double digits of variance. And that's very unusual for a school district. Actually, the variance should go down over the course of the year from one report to the next as we determine where we can trim and where we might have made savings throughout the years, not savings like cuts, but savings in that we didn't spend all of something. So this is the tightest first interim as compared to budget adoption that the district has probably seen in 10 years. And that's actually what's helped us to stabilize and get to that qualified certification, which is the financial improvement for the district. This just lists out the details of the changes from adopted to first interim. For those of you that want to go through and see that detail on the presentation, like I said, it's online. Feel free to go through that. And then, of course, part of every interim report is that current year +2 projection. And so this is the multi-year projection of the district's unrestricted general fund. There's not a whole lot of news on this slide, except that I've been training staff. We've lost a lot of knowledge over the past 5 to 6 years of how to adequately and correctly project expenses and revenues. And so you don't on this slide see as many fluctuations as we have in the past as well. And you actually also see what we call a natural improvement over time. So if you look at the net surplus or shortfall row going over time, you see a decrease in the structural deficit. What was done there? Frankly, nothing. The only thing that's done there is that we've taught staff how to project revenues correctly. And so you see the natural progression of our revenues going up slowly over time due to projected cost of living allowance increases, which we take from the LOA's office as well as FCMAT and school services. And so we're just projecting our revenues better. So expenses aren't going down, revenues are going up slightly. Now, but the other thing that's not in here is that we can't put in things that we don't know yet. So for example, since this presentation was put together, we were told that next year's projections of increased revenues are going down because the current recommendation by LAO is to decrease our COLA by a full percentage point. So instead of 3.51, I think it's down to 2.51. So revenues are going to go down now. And there's no increases in here. So you're all aware, and you all probably hear the same rumors that I do living in San Francisco, that our teachers union might strike. SEIU and our union have not been able to negotiate settlements yet. So there are no salary increases in here. Salaries are the biggest portion of our budget. So it's really tough in a school district in California. It's tough for every school district. This is not a San Francisco thing. It's tough to project at this time what the real deficit is going to be because there have been no raises settled for this year or next year. So these deficits are without raises, and those are the largest driver of our year-over-year increase in expenses. This just refers to a planned deficit. And so it just shows what that deficit is over time and tries to give the community some definition. There's been a lot of confusion over what a planned deficit is. So it's just informational. The other biggest portion of our operating fund is our restricted general fund. And in San Francisco, the restricted general fund is much larger, I think, than any other district I've worked for before as far as a percentage overall. And that's mostly through the generosity of the parcel taxes that have been passed by voters in the city of San Francisco. They're part of our restricted resources, and they are only to be used on increased pay for our teachers, which is why we've been able to augment teacher pay in the district. But that is why our restricted resources look like such a large, proportionally large part of our funding. So this is a single year look. This is interesting. We've actually decreased, just by cleaning up the budget, we've decreased the anticipated deficit in the restricted side by about $8 million, $7.5 million actually. And we've also received some additional revenues this year, some additional ELOP, about 18 million, as well as, again, the rest of the increases in revenues is largely because we have taught staff how to better project and use better resources from the state to more accurately project their restricted resources coming in. So that increase in revenue and expenses is just through budget improvement. For the multi-year projection on the restricted side, you see that the surplus on the deficit on the restricted side is relatively stable. That's for a number of reasons. Restricted money tends to be a little more challenging to spend. It requires, it's first of all more restricted, there's more reporting. And so our schools and our offices tend to actually spend it at a slower rate. It's the opposite of what I would like to see as the district's fiduciary, because we want to spend our hardest to spend money first. But every district sort of struggles with this and this concept. It's just human nature. They tend to spend the easier money to spend first. But the deficit here is relatively stable. Notice that the state and I am not as concerned on the restricted side. First of all, we never fully spend like all the departments think they are, right? Implementing all their ideas sometimes means that we don't spend everything that they think. And we have a significantly large fund balance on the restricted side. And we have to spend this money. Most of it is time delimited, meaning we have to spend it within certain period of time. And so we're constantly trying to get folks to spend it and not give any of it back, because usually if we don't spend it in time, we have to give it back. And so that's why naturally we actually try to over budget on the restricted side a little bit to try to get them to spend it in a timely enough fashion so that we don't give any of that money back. Not that we're greedy, but we want to spend it on behalf of our students and not send it back to whoever is providing it. And then we go into the County Office of Education, which is in positive certification. That's online as well, but that's not really what we're here to talk about today. So I'll stop there because I know folks had a lot of questions.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to hand it over to Nicole from our team to facilitate the Q&A. But before I do that, I think that was very helpful as a non-budget person. You explained that very clearly. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
And I think just like leading into the Q&A before Nicole starts facilitating through the rest of the questions, I know the biggest thing that we've been hearing, or there's a lot that we're hearing, but one of the biggest concerns right now and questions is around this reserve while we're cutting. So, the proposed cuts that will be heard and decided on next Tuesday, they seem very drastic. And, there's these really significant changes, or these really drastic cuts while we're, putting away this reserve. And so, again, I know they're not voted on, they're not approved yet, but they are proposed. And so I wonder if, as we're transitioning to Q&A, you can start by giving your thoughts on why are we doing this reserve when we're experiencing these really hard cuts to something as significant as social workers in our schools?
Yeah, great question. I'm actually going to bring the presentation up because I'm going to illustrate the point by pointing to things on the presentation. So hold on one second. Didn't know that was your first question, so I will just bring it back up. And so, I don't want to stop sharing now. I want to share. Okay. Can you folks see the screen, or is it gone?
We can see the screen.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let me see if I can get back to it. Okay. So hopefully I don't make you sick by flipping through it really quickly. So this has to do with positive and negative certification. So I think folks can be, it's a confusing thing to do. So look at this first interim projection. Notice that so here's our total revenues. This is school district budgets are not particularly sophisticated or elegant, and neither are the measurements that are used to assess them. So our total revenues, about 745 million, total expenditures that are planned at this point, 796 million, leaving us this deficit. So for us to be qualified, so let's go through the different things. For us to be positively certified for our budget, this number plus this number plus this number, there has to be enough money to pay for it out of this carry forward amount right here. So when you're deficit spending, you have to have enough in your savings account or your fund balance to pay for the deficit spending. Prior to this report, the numbers that add up for the current plus 2 years, we did not have enough money in our carry forward to pay for it. That's why we were negative certification. Notice that I haven't changed expenses or revenues. I've just improved the way that budget is done. So nothing magical, just financial good stewardship. So now there's enough money in the carry forward to pay for the current plus the next 2 years of anticipated deficit. That's why we are showing a fiscal improvement, right? That's the law. That's what we have to show as far as that current plus 2 years. But the other thing that I said is, please note, we don't have some of our major expenses yet reflected in the budget, right? So to keep that status, we're going to need a place that we don't spend to take the money from if we don't have enough money up here in this money that we just sort of spend down as we get extra expenses. So what you see between line D and E is the movement of some of that fund balance, some of our savings account into Fund 17. And the only difference between Fund 17 and Fund 1 is that when things are in Fund 1, people often confuse it with money that's free to get for different reasons, for one-time expenses, et cetera. But if we let people spend that money, then we don't necessarily have money to pay for these future anticipated deficits when we overspend. And so what you're seeing, notice on this Fund 17 line, that we are taking out of it. Currently, the plan is that we take out of Fund 17 to balance the budget and not go back into negative certification for the next 2 years. So in other words, we have to have some place to pay for our deficits. Now that's one use of a reserve versus just leaving things in fund balance, because then the board has to vote to take the money in or out rather than just spending any money that's sitting in fund balance in Fund 1. And so this basically puts in place the need for the board to thoughtfully have a place to pay for their anticipated deficits instead of hoping there's enough money in fund balance at the end of the year, which is what the current practice has been, right? So the reserve does not restrict the money in any way for the board to spend on it in any way that they would like. What it does do is it sets it aside to pay for the deficits that we already have on the books, right? So it can do that. If we were to just spend all that money, and remember, we have some major cost drivers still not accounted for in the budget, that's when we get into danger of potentially having to take out a loan. And that's not negative certification, that's going into receivership. And we lose all local control at that point. And as somebody that works with the state, doing some of these complicated things and working with districts that struggle financially, if and when I would be a receiver, right? Like that's the time that there is no local contract, there is no local authority, and we cut anything that's not essential to the schools. And San Francisco is a generous city that provides a lot that is not considered essential or provided for in state funding. So that's not a place we want to get to. So the reserve sets aside a place to pay for the deficits, and these deficits, keep telling yourself they're going to grow because we have not included any raises or negotiated agreements yet. So this is the earliest report out on the annual budget. So that's the purpose of doing it. Creating a reserve has nothing to do with the fiscal stabilization plan. People conflated those two issues. The reserve is so that we have a place to pay for our deficits as well as any other emergencies that come up. So for example, our state is saying pretty clearly that there are some financial hard times ahead for them. One of the things that happens when the state has a hard time is we frequently engage in a process called deferrals. I've been through many of them for school districts. And all a deferral means is the state will give us our monthly money at some point. But sometimes they will delay when we get our money by a month or two, which means that we have to have enough cash on hand to pay for our monthly expenses if we receive deferrals. And so that's an example of where a reserve fund is necessary because the operating costs of this school district range between $100 and $150 million a month, right? So 111 is the average cost of a month throughout the year. So it puts into reserve 1 month in the event that we get a deferral and we still need to be able to make payroll. If we don't do that, I'm back again in the position of having to take out a loan to pay for district expenses. Now, I would try not to go into receivership because as your fiscal steward, I might take out an interfund loan, which we could do. We still have to pay interest for it, so it's expensive. Or I could take out a trans, which is a tax revenue anticipatory note for those of you that are into finance. If you're curious what that is, a short-term borrowing instrument, also very costly for a district. So we don't want to get into a position where we need money and I have to find places to keep the doors open to take it from. So that's why it's wise for the board to have a reserve, so that when we have a deficit or when we have a real need, we're not putting the district, frankly, in hock by taking out loans to keep the doors open, right? So that's the purpose. Also notice that the reserve was not established because, well, I'll pick on myself. It's not like I woke up in the middle of the night and said, oh, I have an idea, we'll establish a reserve. A reserve is a prudent and practical thing that all school districts are supposed to have. And our board does have resolutions that they passed in 2023 and board policy directing whoever is in my position to create a reserve. That's after they went into negative. And so that was why we did it. We just didn't do it because we thought it was, a good idea. It is a good idea. But there is also direction. Now, the timing of it, I know, has been the concern, right? So why do this now? Why not wait until we're flush with money? Well, I will tell you from a financial standpoint, we are in a declining enrollment position, as most districts in California are, meaning that we're losing students every year. There's fewer families of childbearing age. People are having fewer children. We're also seeing state exiting of population for the first time. The last 4 years have been the first time in California history we're seeing that, and it's disproportionately families with school-age children. So we have fewer children, less money in the pot year over year to pay for expenses. And so this idea of let's wait until we have lots of money again, the district is fully committed in all of its resources. So there's not a time that we're getting a big windfall of money to put aside. We have to prudently manage with what we have, and not having any reserve puts the district in a very precarious position. So that's a long answer. I hope that you were able to follow all my bouncing arrows, but that's the answer.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that was, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Meredith.
No, just passing it to you. And
Okay.
yeah, I think there's still a lot of concern there, but yes, go ahead, Nicole.
So Chris, one thing that I think for many parents who submitted questions around we see kind of some of this coming up in chat of like, in this year there was this variance and that year it looked like this. Like, how confident are you in the numbers that are being presented, given the history of challenges with accurately being able to explain where we are from a financial picture?
Yeah, well, I'm more and more confident every day. So I'm the one that actually presented the first district variance report, right? So, and I did that to illustrate the point that people are concerned about. I'm highly concerned because of the poor controls and practices in place, that we were seeing variances that actually I've never seen before. So I saw a lot of double-digit variances, but I also saw triple-digit variances. And that's because there weren't a lot of controls put in. So when I highlighted earlier that you're not seeing huge swings in numbers from adopted to first interim, that tells you we're already putting those controls in place. Now, a variance in a budget is normal. So I'm going to, in terms of your household budget, let's say that you and your partner, for your family of three, after taxes, you're bringing home $100,000 a year, right? You are planning for that full $100,000 if you're doing, hopefully you're doing a household budget, right? You're not just winging it. You're planning for that budget. Let's say that you budget every dollar of that $100,000. You're not going to spend every dollar of that $100,000. You might be $1,000 off. Maybe you're $1,000 under. That's a variance. That's all a variance is. Maybe you're $1,000 over and you had to take money out of your savings account, or you put more on your credit card than you were actually able to pay off. That's what a variance is. And every organization, public or private, or even your own house, you have a budget variance based on all the different factors that happen throughout a year. Now, a household budget is typically a lot easier than a big private or public budget because we do have changing numbers all year long, right? So the numbers do change, enrollment changes, ADA changes, there's new revenues, there's new expenses, but we also don't always spend everybody's budget that they submit, right? Some people just don't get around or they can't find the person that they wanted to have. That's what variances are. So variances in and of themselves aren't bad. What I explained when I did the deep dive into the variance, and those of you that are interested, it was part of the first board meeting in October. It was the fiscal close, which included a budget to actual variance report and analysis. So you can go check that out if you're interested. But we should see a reasonable variance. What does that mean? That means in a district this size, I would like to see a single digit variance with the caveat that the portions of the variance that go over a single digit, they occur, but that we explain them. So for example, on the restricted side, we just got $17.6 million more in ELOP than we had initially been told. That's a variance. We just got a variance because we got more money. So we should be able to explain our variances. I don't really want to see anything over than a 10% variance, but to get from triple digit variances down to a 10% variance means that I have a couple years of work to do. To make sure that a couple of budget cycles that I identify where all of those discrepancies are coming up and to make sure that they're tightened up. That's a part of the good budgeting and better controls. I can tell you just by comparing this first interim to past ones, it already is looking like significant improvement. So we might not get down to below 10% variance for this year, but I'm certainly anticipating we won't see those triple digit ones again.
Thank you, Chris. So now looking ahead, we have an understanding of kind of where we are, and we know that on the 16th, there will be the fiscal stabilization plan being presented and voted on. Is there anything that you can share in terms of how was that plan created? What analysis was completed to make the recommendations for that plan? So at the higher level.
Yeah. So I heard a lot of, that actually, because I post everything ahead of time, that got more attention than the first interim report. So that's what happens when you post stuff way in advance, right? So the fiscal stabilization plan is a statutory requirement. It's not something that's optional for the school district, right? And so the statutory requirement is that any time that a school district is in qualified or negative certification, the board has to pass a fiscal stabilization plan that addresses the deficit, right? That's the law. It's not optional. They have to do it, right? And so the fiscal stabilization plan, I heard a lot of inaccurate information in public comment the other night about an item that isn't going to be even presented until the 16th. But remember that the structural deficit in the general fund, just some numbers really quickly for folks to hold on to, is roughly $103 million. The fiscal stabilization plan does not call for a reduction of $103 million. It calls for a reduction over 3 years, the current and the next 2 years, a total of about $50 million. So the part that we're addressing with the fiscal stabilization plan is only the unrestricted general fund. Right? That's the fund that we have to pay attention to. That's the solvency of the district as well as our level of certification. It's paying all of our expenses for the current and next 2 years. And that is our most fungible money. That's our most flexible money. So that's what we pay attention to the most. So the fiscal stabilization plan does not try to solve in the current and next 2 years all of the fiscal issues of the district. It is just solving the most pressing ones, which is why it doesn't total 103 million. It only totals a little less than 50. And it doesn't mean that those things are definitely going to be cut. It means that they're going to be removed from the unrestricted general fund. And then we have to wait until we get those other numbers in that currently aren't accounted for, those raises, right? And see what we can do. And then we look at our restricted funds to see whether there's any flexibility left after we give raises there to then pull back and see what we can continue to do while keeping the district solvent for the current plus 2 years, right? So it's a moving target. It's a very complicated process. And we're having to pass that before we have all the data in. So I have to give the board and the district enough movement room that once raises come in and all of the numbers settle out, that they have time to meet their statutory deadline, which is March 15th, to give notice to the appropriate number of employees to keep the district basically solvent at that point. So that's what a fiscal stabilization plan is. They are not acting to do anything other than authorize us within the parameters of the plan to start preparing for fiscal stabilization in the next 4 months based on those items. That's what an FSP is.
So, Chris, based on what you heard then at the BOE meeting, and if you have an opportunity, could you clear up like two misconceptions then that you heard? I think, our perception is reality for many parents in terms of their understanding of this plan. And so I think that this is where what we do of lifting up parents' voices, making sure that people understand what's happening is really important. So if you could clarify any things that you heard that you were like, oh, that's not exactly right, it would be great for us to know those too.
Yeah. So the one that my sense of humor sometimes is a little grim in my head. The assumption that, so I do present the fiscal stabilization plan. It is a financial document. I do not sit and create it. It is the amalgamation of a number of things. It's what was left in the fiscal stabilization plan at the board's last acted upon FSP, which was at the adopted budget, right? And the addition of items that will get us to eliminating the structural deficit in the unrestricted general fund. So it becomes a math exercise. And then we break the math out by what are the things that we have control over. So in the San Francisco budget specifically, as I said before, it has more resources than other districts our size, right? So one of the things that I hear a lot is we don't have enough resources. I am also a teacher and a principal, so I'll always agree that we don't have enough resources. You'll not hear me say anything different, but we do get more resources than other districts our size because of the generosity of our local community, right? That's where all of our teacher augmentation money comes from. But we have to identify things that we are allowed to reduce for the board to have parameters for the fiscal stabilization plan. So in the terms of staffing, as an example, there are things that we have local authority over, which are not statutory. So we have to do all the statutory stuff. We have to have a teacher in every classroom. We have to follow the contract as to the number of teachers and paraeducators in each classroom. We have to provide for custodial services and keep our schools clean, all that kind of stuff that we have to do. And then locally, because we have so many local restricted resources, we also call out a bunch of things that we have to do with that money. So that's where our librarians come from, and our music teachers and our art teachers. That's also where some of our social workers come from, as well as a lot of other staff. They're on restricted resources. By the time we look through all those things, there's actually not a whole lot that we can move. So the ones that we have the ability to change are assistant principals, social workers out of the unrestricted general fund, not provided by Title I, paraeducators, and literacy and instructional coaches. So if you look at those, that's not a whole lot of things that we have the ability to move for a fiscal stabilization plan as far as people. And so what the FSP does, the only one that it holds harmless is literacy and instructional coaches, because those are the ones that we're starting to see improvement with our teachers. That, by the way, they are also teachers, but they work with other teachers to improve their instruction and targeting of our multi-tier systems of support for students that have needs. So the only one that the FSP doesn't reference are those coaches, but we have very few things that we can even touch because they're locked in based on our structure and our funding. The other things that you see in the FSP that you didn't hear a lot of people complaining about are, for example, making the budget controls better, right? So that doesn't require anything but good work in the finance department, and that's why those are the only ones we've enacted so far, and that's how we've gotten to improved financial status. You see central cuts, and I will tell you that most of the cuts last year were central cuts, And we managed to move around our certificated employees so that we didn't lose any certificated folks. And we're still planning on another $15 million of central cuts. Well, the entire district budget is only 6% central, right? So we're quickly running out of areas to cut from there as well. The reductions have to come from somewhere, and so we provide the ones that we have authority over. That's how those documents are developed. It literally is seeing what we can do. So you'll also see general education transportation on there. As a principal, not one of my favorite ones, but remember, I'm supposed to present the finances. I don't try to opine on the program or that type of thing. I just am illustrating what the savings are, but that's a tough one for me to see. Social workers, by the way, as a principal, is also a tough one for me to see. If I were still a principal, I would probably want to make different choices, but I don't do the educational program anymore, and there's not a lot for folks to choose from here. Things are pretty locked in tight with our budget.
So Chris, what can the community expect over the course of the next few months in preparing for the 26-27 school year budget?
Yeah, well,
timing. Oh, sorry. Just looking at timing. I think this might be our last questions. We also want to give families some information about how to participate in their SSCs at their schools.
Okay. Sorry, and I'm trying to look at too many things at once here. I got distracted looking at the screen and the questions. So the process is that the fiscal stabilization plan is the board giving approval on the parameters of what could potentially have to be reduced depending upon where the finances come in. Right. That's the next step. It's December 16th. There's no action taken out of there other than I need to start to prepare for different scenarios with those variables. In January, school sites get next year's budget allocations, and they need to go over them with their school site councils and prepare for allocations for next year. Allocations are the staffing model cross-referenced with the number of students that our projections show are enrolled. We're about halfway through enrollment, October, November. We're almost at the end of December. It closes at the end of January, so we have more movement. And they are preliminary, so they're based on what we know for enrollment now, and we do update them every week so that if we see 20 TK students move from school A to school B, then we also move the teacher and the paraeducator to provide for that class. So that happens in January. Principals do their budget. We're also loosening up local resources. Like last year, we put a lot of restrictions on to try to make sure that we were staffing in the right places first. Some of those restrictions are still in place, but we're making the principals' ability to budget their local resources, because principals have discretionary. Some of them have PTA, PTO money. Some of them have a lot of grants. So we're allowing them to have more flexibility to budget those in advance so that if they lose a staff member in our central allocation, they might be able to provide for it out of their local allocation. So we're providing that time and those resources and loosening that up a little bit. And then budget development, the big parts end by the end of January. And then we basically have a 2-week period of time of seeing all the budgets that the principals and the district offices submit, add them all up and see what they couldn't afford or what they chose not to keep. And that's what goes into we call it a PKS or a RIF. In many industries, it's called a layoff. So that goes to the board in February to say, here's what folks did not pick up. Now, those aren't all positions with people in them. A lot of them are just vacant positions that they decide to drop as well. And so the PKS goes to the board in February. And that is really the framework for what we have to do for staffing as well as to keep the district solvent.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Chris. We know that this will probably be not the last time we invite you to come and join us for
sure.
to talk a little bit more about the budget. We really appreciate the work that you are doing and the clarity that you're bringing. We know that there are hard decisions ahead for SFUSD, and Aaron, I like what you just posted, that there's still work that parents can do to come together to ensure that SFUSD is the most excellent and equitable public school system in our nation. And it takes all of us community district parents together. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to do like a 1-minute just share out about what you can do next as a parent. So let me pull up my slide. As you heard, Chris just shared that we are going to be moving up the process for parent and community engagement pretty quickly. And I just saw that someone also said here in the chat, yikes, this is faster. Is January going to be enough time? And so we really want to highlight that this budget timeline is moving up very quickly, and the importance of parent and community opportunities to engage in within your school site. If you can give a thumbs up on your screen, if you're a member of your school site council, or if you've been a member of your school site council, we'd be great to see how many folks have engaged in that leadership opportunity. I'm seeing a bunch right now come up, so that's fantastic. And your school site council is the group who will partner with your school leadership in approving what ends up getting submitted. School site councils are amazing parent leadership opportunities. They will partner with your PTAs. We don't have enough time to go through all of the how a school site council works, but just want to highlight that if each of you were to go back to your schools this week, reach out to your school principals, find out who's on your school site council, and make sure that they are aware of the shifts to this timing for the budget creation. That helps us make sure that families across our district are informed. The school site council summit is on January 10th. So this, I think I just saw someone post, this moved up from March now into January. And there is a lot of opportunities for community meetings and engagement at your schools. And your principals may need support in helping think through what does that look like. So again, as parents, we can be bridges and partners with our school leaders and really thinking about how do we bring our communities together to create plans that really focus on what each of our unique school communities will need. And you heard some of those other pieces also from Chris. So Meredith, I'm going to turn it back to you to just close us out with any other announcements, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Oh, look, see, there's everyone. Sorry we didn't have more time seeing each other's beautiful faces here, but some of these meetings are more engaging back and forth, and some, when we have especially so many of you, we have our guest speaker and less engagement. Thank you for participating by submitting questions in advance. If you didn't get your question answered, we will try to get it answered by the district. We are sending them all the questions, and we'll see how many they answer. So keep an eye out for our newsletters. Also, keep an eye out for newsletters from our sister arm, SF Parents Action. Sometimes you get those from me, sometimes you get them from Giovanna. There's 2 school board elections next year, not just one. And so we have information coming from our sister arm, SF Parents Action, about those. So stay tuned. We know that this is a really concerning time for the budget, and so we just want to thank you for coming today and getting your questions out there, and some of them answered. And we will do our best to get the district get their answers out to you as quickly as possible. And we are, we are in this together, and we're concerned along with you about what's happening, and this really mixed news. And we are worried and simultaneously hopeful, right? Like I don't know. It's a hard time, and so anyway, we're doing our best, and that requires you all continuing to show up. So thank you for showing up today and each time you do. So hope you have a nice holiday season and New Year, and keep joining us on the Facebook forum and following our newsletters and showing up to our meetings. Thank you so much, everyone.